Never thought the woman I married, the one I loved with every part of my being, would one day become the person to laugh at my pain. That Monday morning started like any other, except for one small, gut-wrenching difference. I wasn't at my desk at work. I was standing in the living room, holding a crumpled envelope in my hand, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. The envelope contained the words I had dreaded ever seeing: termination of employment. I walked into the kitchen, still in my work shirt, and she looked up from her coffee with this half-curious, half-annoyed expression. "You're home early. What happened?" she asked. I swallowed hard, feeling my throat tighten. They, they let me go, I said quietly. She raised an eyebrow, and for a moment I thought maybe she would put her cup down and hug me. Instead, she chuckled, actually chuckled. "Fired? After all these years? What did you do?" I told her it wasn't my fault, that the company had restructured, my department had been dissolved, and it was out of my hands. She just shook her head slowly and said, "Wow, so I married a jobless man now." Those words stung worse than anything I'd heard in my life. I had worked late nights, missed vacations, stayed loyal through countless company storms, and here I was, jobless, with my own wife treating me like a burden. She didn't even try to comfort me. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Well, you better figure something out fast. I didn't sign up for poverty." The next few weeks were some of the darkest of my life. I sent out resumes to every place I could think of. I sat in interviews where I felt like nothing more than a number in a stack of papers. Every rejection email chipped away at me. At home, things were worse. She stopped looking at me the way she used to. She avoided conversations, answered me in one-word replies, and spent most evenings out, claiming she was visiting her sister. I tried to keep my spirits up, but every time I came home empty-handed, the atmosphere in our house grew colder. The woman I once called my partner began treating me like a stranger. She started dropping hints that maybe she needed a man who could take care of her properly. One night, after yet another argument, she said it outright: "If you can't provide for me, maybe I should find someone who can." That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I laid on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had fallen apart so fast. But somewhere in the middle of that long, sleepless night, a thought began to grow in my mind. Maybe losing my job wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something I couldn't yet see. The next morning, I decided something. I was done begging companies to see my worth. I was going to find a way to make them regret ever letting me go. And I was going to make her eat every single word she had thrown at me. But before I tell you how things turned around, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because the next part of this story will shock you. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're watching this from. I want to see just how far this story is reaching. After that night on the couch, something in me shifted. I woke up with this burning determination in my chest. I knew sitting around waiting for a miracle wasn't going to change anything. My savings were almost gone, my marriage was hanging by a thread, and my dignity had been trampled on. I needed to move, and I needed to move fast. I reached out to an old college friend named Mark. He had started a small logistics company a couple of years ago, and I remembered him once telling me he needed someone who could handle operations. I gave him a call and laid it all out for him. "Mark, I might not have a job right now, but I've got skills, experience, and I'm willing to work harder than anyone you know. Let me help you build your company, and in return, give me a small equity share." At first, he hesitated, but after hearing the passion in my voice, he agreed. The salary he offered was barely enough to survive on, but I didn't care. I saw it as a stepping stone. I threw myself into that business like my life depended on it, because it did. I handled client negotiations, solved supply chain nightmares, even drove trucks myself when we were short on drivers. There were days I came home exhausted, covered in dust and sweat, only for my wife to roll her eyes and ask why I was working like a laborer instead of finding a real job. But I ignored her. I kept my eyes on the goal. In 6 months, our profits doubled. The company started getting recognition, and big clients came knocking. Every extra cent I made, I reinvested into the business. I lived like I was broke on purpose, eating instant noodles for dinner and wearing the same old clothes because I knew something bigger was coming.
Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. When I saw the name on the caller ID, I almost didn't believe it. It was the CEO of my former company, the same man who had signed my termination letter. I answered, and after a few awkward pleasantries, he got straight to the point. The company was in trouble. Their latest product launch had flopped badly. They were drowning in debt, and they needed an investor. At first, I thought it was some twisted joke. But the more he spoke, the more I realized they were desperate. I called Mark and laid out the situation. We spent days running the numbers, talking to advisors, and exploring the possibilities. If we sold a small portion of our logistics business and pulled in some other investors, we could buy a significant share of my old company. The idea lit a fire in me. The same company that had thrown me out like trash was now on its knees, begging for help. And I had the chance to step in, not as an employee, but as an owner. Within weeks, the deal was sealed. My name wasn't made public. I came in as a silent investor. The board was relieved to have the funds, and they never bothered to ask too many questions about the man behind them. I kept it that way on purpose. I wanted to watch, to learn, to see exactly who was loyal and who wasn't before I made my move. My wife still had no idea. As far as she was concerned, I was just playing businessman with my little logistics venture. She had no clue that I now had the power to walk into my old company and turn their world upside down. And believe me, I was just getting started. The day was coming when I would stand in front of the very people who humiliated me and show them exactly who I had become. That day would change everything. So if you haven't subscribed yet, you need to do it right now, because what I'm about to tell you next will blow your mind. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're watching this from. I want to see the cities and countries this story is reaching. The day finally came. It was the company's annual general meeting, and the board had been buzzing for weeks about finally meeting the mystery investor who had saved them from collapse. I walked into that room in a tailored navy suit, my shoes polished to a mirror shine, my confidence unshakable. The moment the CEO saw me, he froze mid-sentence. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly, and for a second, you could hear a pin drop. "You," he stammered. I smiled calmly and said, "Yes, me. The man you fired last year now owns a controlling stake in this company." The silence that followed was delicious. I let it hang there for a moment, watching their faces shift from shock to embarrassment to fear. Then I stepped forward, placed a thick folder on the table, and slid it across to the CEO. Inside were termination letters, effective immediately, for every manager and supervisor who had been involved in humiliating me on my last day. "You didn't value loyalty, hard work, or integrity," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Now you'll understand what it feels like to be thrown out without warning." Some of them tried to protest, mumbling excuses about just following orders. But I didn't care. I had spent too many nights replaying the way they'd smirked as I packed up my desk. I had worked too hard to get here to let sentiment stand in the way of justice. By the time I left that meeting, my old enemies were jobless, and I was in full control of the place that once treated me like I was disposable. That evening, I went home and sat my wife down. I told her everything: how I'd invested, how I'd bought the company, and how I'd just fired the people who thought they'd broken me. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open, then tried to smile and say she always knew I'd make it. I just looked at her and said, "No, you believed in my paycheck, not in me." For a moment, she had no response. Then she tried to wrap her arms around me, but I stepped back. "I need to rethink if I still believe in us," I said quietly. That night, I slept in the master bedroom alone. She went to her sister's place again, and for the first time in months, I felt a strange, peaceful silence. No judgmental looks, no sarcastic comments, just quiet. In that moment, I realized I had won something far more valuable than money. I had won back my dignity, my self-respect, and my freedom. Life has a strange way of bringing you full circle. The same doors that once slammed in your face might one day open for you, not as an employee, but as the owner. If you're listening to this right now and you're in a dark place, remember, Today's setback might just be the foundation of tomorrow's greatest comeback. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next story, because I've got more that will light a fire in you. And before you go, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story reaches.